People say I talk about some weird stuff, some far out stuff. But how about that chair that you're sitting in isn't solid? How weird is that?
Welcome back. Third Phase Moon, Blake Cousins. We got a special presentation for you today. David Icke with his new documentary coming out, Renegade. We're going to go behind the curtain and reveal what David Icke is all about. Welcome to the show, David. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Real pleasure to be here.
There's a lot of controversial claims that you state, David Icke, in regards to extraterrestrial races amongst us right now. I've seen in your new documentary that you didn't quite bring that up. Is there a reason behind it?
Well, I talk about so many subjects, not just for the sake of it, but because the vastness of human life and world events and subjects appear on the face of it to be random and unconnected, but I connect them because in the end you're not looking at pixels when you look at human society and the happenings of human society. You're looking at pictures. But if we only see the pixels, if we only see the dots, then all you can perceive is random events which seem to have no pattern, no direction, no way of understanding them.
David Icke. I was sitting there, the audience were laughing.
They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
Fine. David Icke, the person who had been the one that I'd identified with up to that point, was dying 1,000 deaths.
If you don't give them any kind of proof, if you don't give them any reason to believe in you, they will dismiss you as a crank, which is what they're doing.
And I was thinking to myself, my life's over. I live my life to the sound of laughter, literally. When you have that level of ridicule and that level of abuse, one of two things happens. Either you withdraw from the world and hide, or you come out, steal from the fire. And what that mass ridicule did for me was allow me to let go of the prison that almost everyone lives in, which is the fear of what other people think.
Not giving a shit is an immense power. Once we care what other people think about us, they control our lives. It's got to stop.
Once people have one, just one massive preconceived belief unraveled, the next stage is, well, what the hell else have I been thinking that's not true? The whole point of what I do is to alert people to what is planned so that there can be an intervention.
Human enslavement, the next stage, and where this has always been going. The fusion of artificial intelligence into the human mind, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. What's happening in the world compared with what could be happening? The enslavement that could be freedom, the illness that could be health.
But when you connect the dots, whoa, suddenly the picture appears and the world looks very different. And because I connect so many dots, you can't really cover them all in just one movie of, an hour and 40 minutes or so. So what I've concentrated on, and what the movie makers have concentrated on, are the areas of largely the here and now, that it's affecting people's lives directly, but also including the most important thing of all, really, which is the illusory nature of physical reality. Because when you perceive reality as solid and physical, which of course is how we experience it, then everything seems limited. Of course, everything seems to be just a tidal wave of I can't, it's not possible. But when you realize that actually what we're experiencing is an illusion, a bit like a computer decoding Wi-Fi into a very different reality on the screen, then you realize that what we perceive as limited and not possible takes on a totally different perspective.
He picked up a piece of paper and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years.
At number 1, Bush, Republican, Blair, Labour, picked Iraq off the list because that's what they were told to do. And Iraq, of course, was invaded through weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist because it was on the list. It had to be targeted. They didn't have an excuse. They made one up. Then there's this transformation. Now, if we go from Labour to Cameron, David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, Conservative, and we go from Republican Bush to Democrat Obama. But what do? They tick Libya off the list, again, based on a lie, and they start the process to create the civil war in Syria. Now, Drain the Swamp Man comes in, and he's targeting Syria and more targeting Iran.
Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction. They do not respect their neighbors or borders or the sovereign rights of nations. Instead, Iran's leaders plunder the nation's resources to enrich themselves and to spread mayhem across the Middle East and far beyond.
The hidden hand is calling the shots. They come and they go.
And so much of what is termed paranormal, which is actually very normal when you understand it, what we call paranormal becomes obviously possible once you realize how reality works as opposed to how we're told it works throughout our lives. And so this whole aspect of what people call alien contact and what I call manipulation, certainly of some non-human groups of human society from the shadows, is a vast subject, and it wouldn't do it justice just to bring it in as just a small part of one movie. It has to be done in a documentary of its own, and I am hoping that that's what we will be doing, if not next, then soon, to tell that story in the way it needs to be told. Because, you know, if you look at human society and communication, you look at the mainstream media, it's all based on superficiality. You know, there's no substance to it. There's no depth to it. Not in the mainstream. You know, you go into some of these other channels, you do get more depth. But in the mainstream, you don't get depth. You get superficiality. And so you have things like, he thinks aliens are running the world. Yeah, okay. So do you want to know any more? I mean, is that it? And that's usually, is it, in terms of where it finishes. He thinks aliens running the world. He must be mad. Oh, really? Well, have you ever seen the night sky? Look at that blaze of stars and lights. And you're looking at a tiny fraction of the Milky Way galaxy. And until the 1920s, mainstream science believed there was one galaxy in the universe. The latest, highest estimate I have seen, less than 100 years later, is 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. And how many other areas of this universe don't we even know about? Most of it. And it's only one universe within an infinite reality. So I feel it in my water. I know I'm crazy, but I feel that when you have a universe which mainstream science, in terms of its projection of its size, which will be very much less than it is, compare with its size, planet Earth is the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. So I think that out there is other life, and that human life on this billionth of a pinhead might just not be the only life that exists. But the programming is so powerful that people can actually perceive that in the vastness of that which we already know about, or think we do, that human life can be the only life as we know it. I didn't use the term intelligent life because perceiving planet Earth and observing planet Earth, I don't think that's terribly appropriate.
You know, one of the things that I talk about is non-violent non-cooperation. You know, the few can't control the many unless the many allow it. I was speaking in Croatia, in Zagreb, and someone said to me, did you know there's a political party here in Parliament that was inspired by your work? And of course, you know, jaw drop, what?
My name is Ivan Pernar. I am a member of Croatian Parliament. When I have seen that there are many policies that government execute and people are opposed to, I wondered if it's possible to create a political party which would reflect popular opinion, popular will, and not the will of this elite establishment, so on. And so I decided to create my own party. Our party name is Živi zid. It means like a living wall. It came because we were obstructing evictions, because the banks evict a lot of people who can't pay off debt. And we claim that in current debt-based monetary system, debt can't be repaid.
So they started ringing houses that were about to be foreclosed and the bailiffs were coming with people who just wouldn't let it happen. And they streamed this live on the internet, and they got a lot of coverage and a lot of interest, a lot of support.
I think the greatest issue is people not knowing how monetary system works. If they would know, they would challenge it and everybody would live much better off. But of course, the government does not want people to fight the elite, and in order to prevent them from this kind of warfare, they need to divide society within itself. You realize that there is a whole awakening movement around the world. And when I saw what Icke is doing, like I was a bit jealous on him. Like, wow, look at what this guy is doing, you know? I wish I could do something like him. But I knew I would never be a world-known author or whatever. And I then said, well, I can't do what he's doing, but I can challenge this system against which he's speaking about locally.
And it just shows the potential. If people will stop saying, what are they going to do about it, and start saying what we are going to do about it, this political party in Croatia shows what is possible.
Over the years, you've had points when you were at the top of things. And then there was a time that you were ridiculed amongst everybody. But now you're making a comeback. Can you tell us what do you think is the reason behind this?
Well, I've not come back. Of course, I haven't gone anywhere. All I've been doing for nigh on 30 years now is research without an editor looking over your shoulder saying you can't research that, you can't say that. I just go where the information takes me. If it's far out to people's sense of normal, well, fair enough. So be it. I'm following the information. I'm following the facts. I'm not censoring myself through some preconceived idea of what those facts are. Nor am I censoring myself because of this prison that most people live in, which is, well, what will people think if I say this? Couldn't care less. They have a right to think what they like, but then so do I. And so all I've been doing is putting out information, research, communicate for nearly 30 years. And of course, when you first start pointing out that the world is controlled by a very few people to a very malevolent end, and that it does have a non-human aspect to it, then obviously the reaction of not everyone, because even in those days some people had control of their own perceptions and didn't just download them from the system, but great numbers of people, of course, looked at what I said and went, he's mad, he's crazy. Well, the reason I've made this comeback, I haven't. The truth is that people have come back to me, because all I've been doing is the same thing, putting information out there, researching, putting information out there. And what's happened was always going to happen for this reason. I said many years ago that this manipulation of human society would have to, at some point, break the surface. Because if you're manipulating to transform human society into an Orwellian global state, which is what the agenda is, then at some point you can't stay under the radar anymore. You're going to have to start changing society in the way that you want, in a way that people are going to be able to see it. So what's happening now, why this vast change is taking place in terms of people's perceptions of me and attitudes to me around the world, is because people are now seeing that what I said in my books in the 1990s, long ago as that, is happening.
This reality is nothing like we think it is.
My next guest is David Icke. He describes himself as a full-time investigative journalist searching for the truth of what's really going on in the world. David, good morning.
Morning, Ryan.
I set out on a world speaking tour in the summer of 2016 because I could feel that more and more people were starting to feel uneasy about the world.
You realize that there is a whole awakening movement around the world.
At least he's giving truths out there that plant a seed.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you welcome on stage David Icke? Thank you. Thank you. Whoa. Thank you. Thank you. If I have to be stopped.
To stop you telling lies.
It's becoming more and more of a challenge to find places to speak without it being cancelled.
My website is blocked in schools and universities and colleges. The system is desperate to silence what I'm putting out. Why?
They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
Fine. We were ridiculed beyond belief. Press camped outside the house, followed us on holidays.
Yes, I know people put a lot of work into conspiracy theories, but I still think they're actually intellectually lazy.
Have you read any of my books?
No.
How do you know that it's intellectually lazy?
If I had not let go of this concern what other people think, does anybody think I would have talked and written about some of the things I have since? No way!
When I saw what Icke is doing, I was a bit jealous on him. Wow, look at what this guy is doing.
I love his mind. I don't know if anybody else could do it but him, actually.
We are in a period now where speaking your truth is not just important, it's utterly crucial to where humanity goes from here.
I mean, what kind of world are those kids going to live in if we go on as we are? But we're not going to. Much as that will distress those that wish it to happen. Good.
The world needs renegades, and it needs them now.
Some of it already has happened. Quite a lot of it's already happened, but it's happening in greater and greater extremes. This is why freedom of speech is being destroyed. All over the world, there's this censorship sweeping through human society where you can't challenge the official narrative or you're silenced. Happens to me all the time. And so when you go from what people call a theory, it wasn't, it was based on fact, into something tangible that you can see, then of course people are going to look at it in a very different light. And what's happened in terms of my work and the attitudes to me over the last few years has been a fantastic transformation compared with what it was before. But I would say this to people. I've got an itchy nose. I'll say this to people. If you don't speak your truth and you suppress yourself, censor yourself, the worst kind of censorship, self-censorship, because there's no debate. It's just not said, which is what's happening more and more. Then how are you going to affect anything? And if I hadn't have spoken my truth in those days when to say what I said attracted enormous historic levels in Britain, for instance, of ridicule, then the information would not have been out there for people to say now, hold on a minute, what that bloke said is happening. So don't be intimidated, I would say, into self-censorship. Just speak your truth, and if people don't like it, well, they can do the other thing. And if people around you and your friends don't like it, well, they're not friends really, are they? If they won't respect your right to your unique opinion, your unique truth. And I hope that I've been a symbol of the fact that you can speak your truth, you can face enormous ridicule, and you can come through it, because if what you say has validity, it will at some point be seen to have validity. But if you don't say it in the first place, that process can never happen.
Every single event that we've done anywhere in the world, there's been certain groups that have contacted venues, made outrageous libelous claims about what David's going to speak about, and have in many cases got venues to cancel on us.
They tell the organizers that I'm going to go on the stage and I'm going to say a stream of racist things, none of which I have ever said, none of which am I ever going to say. What then happens, staggeringly, is that instead of coming to you and saying, well, these people have said you're going to say this, you're going to say that, what's going on? They pull the event. And we hear about the event we've been organizing for months being cancelled. We hear about it in the media.
In Germany alone, for example, I've been in touch with over 70 venues, and we've still never managed to pull off a Germany show. And there's a venue that we had in Berlin, which to this day, nigh on well over a year, have never actually contacted me to tell me the event's been cancelled. I found out from a German newspaper when they published a story about it.
And my website is blocked in schools and universities and colleges. It's blocked in government departments and government agencies. And here's me, one person, who was supposed to be this great nutter, and the system is desperate to silence what I'm putting out and to stop as many people as possible ever hearing it. Why?
My question to you is, what do you think of the new generation that they're waking up, that we are actually being lied to now?
I find it fascinating to observe young people today, because they fall ever more clearly into two basic categories. Those that are absorbing the perceptual programs that are given to them to download all through their formative years and then into the adult world. And those other young people, who I have tremendous respect for, who, despite, in my view, being part of the most perceptually targeted generations in history, not least because of the technology social media and all this, despite being so viciously, mercilessly targeted in terms of their perceptions, they've not absorbed the program. And they're questioning and they're seeing through it. And that is a phenomenal testament of the power of consciousness over programming. So that's a great thing. And we need more and more young people to wake up from the download.
One aspect of shutting down opinions and information that the system doesn't want circulating is to absolutely intimidate people into silence. And out of this building, of course, has come the infamous Twitter storm. That's when you post something that's outside of the official narrative, and whoa, you get endless abuse. I have a methodology of dealing with Twitter storms, and it goes like that, okay? If you don't agree with what I say, please be my guest, because that's your human right, that's your freedom. But if you think that you can have an opinion and I can't, well, see that, because I don't give a shit. You have a right to freedom, great. And you want that, don't you? Oh yeah, I have freedom, I just say what I like. Well, I have that right too, and so does everyone else. And if you don't like that, well, have some of that.
And if people think that freedom of speech, freedom of privacy, freedom of opinion is being censored now, well, hang about and strap in, because this is nothing where it's meant where it's meant to end. And when I talk about the programming of perception, when you observe life, that's what it is. You come out of the womb and immediately you are influenced in terms of your perceptions by your parents. Not because they're malevolent, well, most of them, but because they've been through the system of perceptual programming that you're about to go through, and they've absorbed it, and they think they're doing the right thing by passing that programming on to you, not realizing it's programming. And then you go to school a ludicrously short time after you arrive here. You've only just got here. And already you're sitting at a desk and an authority figure is telling you what is right, what is wrong, what has happened, what hasn't happened, what is possible, what's impossible. And your whole perceptual relationship with reality and life is being downloaded to you. And if you hear no other possibility, then the likelihood is you're going to absorb that perceptual programming, and it's going to be your view of everything, possibly for life.
One of my great surprises over the years was to read in a newspaper about a program that's a radio program in Britain that's been running a very, very long time, called Desert Island Discs.
My castaway this week is the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Alice Walker.
And when she was asked, what book would you take to the desert island, she said,
I would like to take Human Race, Get Off Your Knees by David Icke.
She said, when I met her, there was this silence. Did she just say a book by David Icke? I met her and spent hours with her at her home in California, and it's one of the most memorable days of my life.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Delighted to have time to talk to you this time.
I know. Oh.
Hey.
I think David Icke is a great teacher, and I think he's really the right teacher for now because he's so present.
I've seen The View. I do not understand why you live here. What makes you live here?
well.
You should live in downtown LA.
Yeah, exactly. Well, tough. Come on in.
Thank you. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
What I found that if a person just accepts, well, actually that I wasn't told the truth, was I? The next question is, well,
what else am I being lied about?
What else am I not being told that's not true? And the dominoes start to fall. I see that a lot. Yeah. So
I think that we need him as a teacher because some of the subject matter is so strange to most people. Strange just mainly because they're not used to thinking outside of a certain, box, if you will.
If I've ever met a spiritual soulmate in terms of the way we see the world, then it's Alice Walker. She's just an incredible example of someone who doesn't just believe something, but lives it. And all these years later, she's still there, still driving on, still challenging imposition and challenging injustice. And it was an absolute joy to spend time with her. I hope it's not the last time that we ever meet.
I love his mind, and I think for people who enjoy exploring the nature of reality and unreality, what he teaches is very intriguing. I, for one, am just deeply grateful. I feel I've learned so much, and it makes me feel more at home in the mystery.
I want to ask you, who is the contributor to the biggest lies on Earth right now? Is it the internet or is it our own government?
You cannot understand how the world is controlled unless you see how the dots connect. So when you ask the question, is it the internet or is it the government? It would appear that it's either or, when it's both. And it's both because of the structure of human control. The way that we miss the structure, the connections, is by seeing everything as individual, as an individual entity. So Facebook is an entity, and Apple's an entity, and the banking system's an entity, and the oil cartel's an entity, and the pharmaceutical cartel's an entity, and they're all working in and of themselves. Doesn't work like that at all. Imagine a spider's web, and in the middle is the spider. And from the spider comes this agenda for human control. The strands in the web immediately around the spider are the most exclusive secret societies. Many don't even have names to make them harder to track. And the people in those secret societies, most of them, will be completely unknown to the public arena. They're the ones that know the big story of what's actually happening. Then you come out from the spider a bit further, still in the hidden, and you come across secret societies we do know about, like the inner core of the Freemasons, the inner core of the Jesuit order, the Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, the Knights Templar, the Skull and Bones Society, next to Yale University, which has produced the Bush presidents, for instance. And at the inner core of these known secret societies, they also know most of this agenda. Although the compartmentalization of secret societies and what we call degrees means that most members of the secret societies don't know. Pawns in a game they don't understand. And then as you come out from the spider, you meet a point on the web that I call the cusp. This is the point where the hidden meets the seen. And here you'll find semi-secret groups like the Council on Foreign Relations in America, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, and the Bilderberg Group. And these are groupings of people from different parts and institutions of the government of society, transnational corporations, intelligence agencies, military, government, and so on, banking. And these cusp organizations take the agenda coming from the spider, and they play it out into the public arena. And at that point in the web, we're looking at the world of the seen. We're looking at governments, government agencies, banking systems, corporations, media ownership, etc. And at that point, including all the Silicon Valley corporations and internet corporations, and at that point, everything seems to be happening randomly. This is doing that, they are doing that, they are doing that, they are doing this. But in fact, the society, not everything of course, but the society transforming changes and happenings and decisions being made in the world of the seen that appear so random are actually ultimately coming from the spider. So if you get to that inner core of the web, Facebook is the banking system. The banking system is the pharmaceutical cartel. The pharmaceutical cartel is the biotech cartel, and so on. And that's how it works. So that we have the illusion of random decisions being made by random people, but the society-changing decisions are not random. They are connected to this inner core force that's behind all this. And so, is the internet lying to us more than governments? It's all the same. And when I say governments, most people in government are not trying to manipulate. It's the core, always the core, that this is coming from. Because what you do is you compartmentalize companies, governments, institutions, agencies, so that the few at the top know what's really going on and what their agenda really is. And the further you come down the pyramids, you meet more and more people who know less and less and less about what the few at the top know. This is how secret societies work. The people at the top of the secret society know what the secret society is really about and what its agenda really is and where it really wants to take the world. The further you come down in these so-called degrees, the less and less they know about what the few at the top know. And there you have structured institutions, governments, corporations in the same way as secret societies in terms of compartmentalization. It's what intelligence agencies call the need-to-know technique. People only need to know what they need to know to make their individual contribution without knowing how it all fits with everyone else's contribution to create a very different picture to what the individual contribution appeared to be doing.
If there's some kind of master plan, a master organization that's controlling Earth right now, what kind of advice would you give in order to take the power back and give it back to the people?
Yes, there is a master plan and there is a master organization. The master organization is this web that I'm describing. And there is a master plan, and it's quite simply to assimilate human consciousness into an alien force. Whoa, God, that's fantastic, isn't it? Well, yeah, of course it is. Because we're kept so much in the dark from what's actually happening that when we hear what's actually happening, it sounds fantastic. I wish it were fantastic. I wish it were not happening. I really do. I could get on with my life and do something else, but it is happening and we have to face it and not run away from it. And this whole technological prison that is being built all around us is fundamentally the end game in this assimilation of human consciousness. See, first of all, when there's a few of you, and it is a few at the core in full knowledge doing this compared with the 7.7 billion population, if the few are going to control the many, then power has to be centralized. If the more points of decision making there are, the less control any central cabal is going to have. So you need incessant centralization of power so that in the end, decisions are made by a handful of people at a global level. Now, this has been unfolding for thousands of years, because this is not something that's new. This has been unfolding all the way through the generations of thousands of years for reasons I explain in my books, and by means that I explain in my books. But when you look at how humanity was organized further back, it was a tribal situation where people lived in tribes, often small tribes, and the tribes made decisions about what happened to the tribe and what happened to their society. Because up to this point, human perception, which is how we're controlled, has been manipulated and imposed by control of information. That's what all the censorship now is about, to stop challenge to that narrative coming from alternative sources. But when you control information, you control perception, because we get our perceptions from information received. And from perception comes our behavior. We behave the way we do in different ways because of our perceptions. And our perceptions come from control of information. So that's how it's worked so far. But this end game is to go further than that. It's that artificial intelligence will become our perception. We'll be getting them direct, not through manipulation, but by artificial intelligence deciding what those perceptions are. This is the most important thing at this moment that people need to realize where this is going. That artificial intelligence is planned to become the human mind. And it's unfolding around us so fast. The idea was to get us hooked and addicted to technology that we hold, then to move on to technology that we put on the body. It's legion now. Because the plan was to get in the body, which is already happening. People are being microchipped around the world. Thousands in Sweden, for instance, is one example. Because once they get technology in the body, they can externally manipulate our perceptual state. So that's the most important thing that people need to know, and that's why I've gone into it in Renegade at some length.
If there's some kind of master plan, a master organization that's controlling Earth right now, what kind of advice would you give in order to take the power back and give it back to the people?
In terms of people taking their power back, there's two ways to approach a problem. You can find a solution, and we're drowning in solutions which usually lead to more problems, or you can remove the cause of the problem. You can look at why things are happening and then stop the why. So why is humanity so easily controlled? Because we've accepted the perceptual download from the system all our lives. So if that's the problem, then the solution is to deprogram. Deprogram from all the perceptions that we have been told to believe in all our lives. To take a blank sheet of paper, symbolically or literally, and say, okay, from now on, I'm not going to live my life and make my decisions and perceive the world from the perspective that I've been told to all my life. I'm going to insist that whatever I believe has a factual, supportable basis for me believing it. Because if you look at what people believe, whether it's religious belief or cultural belief or political belief, overwhelmingly, these are not researched beliefs. They are just taken for granted beliefs. And so we're absorbing this stuff. It's becoming our reality, and therefore dictating our lives and the way we see the world, thus dictating human society collectively. When people have hardly ever, ratio to the population, said, well, okay, I'm being asked to believe this. Is it true? Is it valid? There's no more to know than mainstream system science tells us, or mainstream pharmaceutical cartel-controlled medicine tells us. Oh, come on. So, open your mind to other possibilities, and you'll see they make more sense than the crap and the trash that we've been told to believe in all our lives.
So you've got this new documentary coming out, David Icke, Renegade. Can you tell us and the people what they could possibly learn that they haven't heard about before?
Well, Renegade came about because I was approached by an American filmmaking company. Not because they supported my work, but because they thought my story would make a good movie. And we filmed it in 4 countries, I think. And basically it's fly on the wall, following me around in different situations. And in the process of doing that, enormous amounts of information are presented in the movie. And it was edited by this company, not by me. And the idea was that it would be accessible to people who have never come across this information before. And that's important because we need to constantly expand the number of people, not that, just believe what I'm saying, but have the opportunity to assess it and look at it amid this war of censorship that's going on. And I was absolutely delighted when I saw it, because it works on 2 levels. It connects an enormous amount of dots, and new information will be there for those that are into this whole area of thought and investigation. But what I've found incredibly encouraging from the premieres that have been shown are people who've contacted us to say that they were into my information, so they went along to see the premiere, but they took people with them who were completely new to the information, and they were describing the effect the film had on them, to allow them to see explanations not just of world events but of reality itself, which they'd never come across before, and explanations that made far more sense to them than what they have been told to believe up to this point. And this is one of the things that I've observed over and over again in the last 30 years, is the power of information which makes sense to people. It's life transforming. And there are so many people who look at life in a different way, but are surrounded by those that are just living and breathing the program, and they are intimidated into expressing themselves and saying what they really feel, because they fear the reaction and the consequences from people around them. You're mad, you're this, you're that, and all this other nonsense. And what I hope the film will do, and I'm sure it will, is point out to those people operating in isolation all over the world that actually you're not alone. There are increasingly vast numbers of people, increasing all the time, who are reassessing both self-identity and the nature of life and the nature of world events and what's happening in the world and where it's going. And I think this film is coming out at exactly the right time because of the even greater number of people who might not be looking at this information yet, but are getting more and more uneasy about the way the world's going. I don't like what's happening. I don't like the way the world's going. What is going on? Well, what Renegade does in an hour and 40 minutes or so is explain what's going on. And that's why it's proved to be so powerful for so many people who've watched it in the premieres. And also, talking of the premieres, 2 of them were cancelled. This is a film, Renegade, about my life and work. And there was a movie theater in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica, the Aero, that cancelled at 2 hours' notice before the film was supposed to be shown, because it was about me. And there was one in London as well that we had to change the venue at the last minute for the same reason. So, you know, there are many different forces and puppets of those forces that don't really know what they're doing, like the 2 examples I've just given, who don't want you to see this film, don't want anyone to see this film, because for 2 reasons. One, it puts me in a completely different light to the demonized bloke that most people hear about. And 2, it is presenting information that is life transforming. And those 2 things are like a cross to a vampire in terms of this cabal that wants to control our perception. The perceptual program will not survive watching this movie, and that's its great power.
I gotta admit, David, some of the things you say are quite controversial. There's a lot of censorship now lately on the internet. Have you had any repercussions of what you've been trying to get out? Any death threats?
Well, I've not had any death threats, but if anyone knows me, they would realize that that's a waste of time, because I'm not intimidatable. My philosophy on life and reality and the true I is that we are simply awareness, a state of being aware. The true I talking now is the awareness that is experiencing through this vehicle called a body. So I don't identify with being David Icke. That is a name for my current experience. What I identify with is being a state of awareness, an infinite state of awareness on an infinite journey of exploring forever. This is just a brief experience in a little band of frequencies that we call the world. And therefore, how do you intimidate that? You can't. We'll kill you. Well, you could kill my body, yeah. You will kill me. Because I can't be destroyed. I'm consciousness. And if I left this body, which I will do eventually anyway, like all of us will, then I will continue my exploration of forever. So I'm terrified. Ooh, I'm shaking. And we'll say this about you, we'll say that about you. Go ahead, couldn't care less. Because this prison of fearing what other people think, it really is the human prison cell. Most people are not living their lives on the basis of what they want, they think, they feel, but they're living within an area that is dictated by other people. How do I say this without people thinking I'm mad? Personally, I couldn't care less if they do. Feel free. What do I leave out so they'll think I'm an okay person? How about nothing? How about you just speak your truth, and how people react to you is their problem, not yours? And I went through phenomenal ridicule, historic levels of ridicule in the early 1990s, and it set me free. Set me free of this prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think. I have no fear of what other people think. I have no fear of consequences. Speaking my truth is all that I'm concerned about. Consequences will take care of themselves. And so it's very difficult to deal with someone like me if you are the, quote, system, because there's nothing basically they can do that can stop you doing what you're doing. That way they can silence you and they can censor you, or in terms of the mediums, yeah. But they can't stop you doing everything you can to circulate your information, because I won't be intimidated into silence. I won't be intimidated into self-censorship. And that's the power that we all have. So if they gave me death threats, I would just run at them faster. So that's a waste of time. They could try to discredit me. Well, they've tried that. Been trying that for 30 years. And I just get more and more people looking at my work. So that hasn't worked, has it? And neither will it. Because people are starting to get wise to what's going on now. And they want to see it articulated in the public arena. So it's like when you're playing a sporting event and you can get a coach to work for days and days before about how you're going to deal with the opposition, and you go out onto the pitch and you're not expressing you're expressing what you think is necessary to deal with the opposition. So your uniqueness and your ability is being limited because you're more concerned with the opposition than what you could do. Well, I won't play that game. I do what I do, and I continue to do what I do, and the system will have to deal with me, not me with the system. So, yes, I'm controversial, but if you're not controversial in a world that's insane, then it might be a good idea to find a mirror and go, ooh, why am I considered uncontroversial in a world of insanity? With all the wars and people dying of hunger in a world of plenty. Why am I considered normal in that world? The world's mad. It's insane. And it's run by insane people. Therefore, if you're not seen as controversial, why not? Of course, the truth is always controversial amid a tapestry of lies. Of course it is. And so I'll always be controversial until the world comes back to some form of sanity, and then I'll become the norm. And unfortunately, that's a way in the future yet.
I've actually had a chance to screen the film Renegade, and I've learned quite a bit by viewing it, and it is a mass amount of information. Can you tell us what you think is the most important, vital information that we could learn from the documentary?
Well, the film has a big tapestry of information, all of which is important, but I would just highlight two things. One, how things connect. How things are not random, how we appear to see random events, but if you take a step back and you go deeper in the rabbit hole, you realize that actually the society transforming ones are very calculated and long planned. And the other thing about the information in Renegade is about the technological AI controlled society, which people need to address urgently and not let it run away past the point of no return, that the system can play off label against label in divide and rule, which is the most foundation necessity of the few controlling the many, is to set the many at war with themselves. And now, of course, we're seeing the labels, the self-identity labels, subdividing and subdividing and subdividing into smaller and smaller labels. And they take us further and further and further from the understanding that the labels are experiences. What we are is consciousness, and ultimately the same consciousness. We are different points of attention within the same infinite state of awareness, which of course makes things like racism and all these other discriminatory ways of seeing the world to be ludicrous. Because in the end, take away the labels, take away the experiences that are the labels, take away the body, and what's left is one infinite state of consciousness of which we are all points of attention. But look, from that perspective alone, at how self-identifying with labels creates the infinite potential for conflict and divide and rule. My label's better than yours. You can't say that about my label. Time to grow up while we still can.
Disclosure is right around the corner, and as of lately, the DoD, the Pentagon, have finally admitted that they have been investigating UFOs for many years now. Do you think disclosure is right around the corner?
I've talked and written over the decades about the fact that ultimately, beyond human sight, this human society is being manipulated via these networks in our society. It's being manipulated by a non-human force. And of course, people have found that kind of fantastic and often hilarious and what have you. But what we're seeing now, and only in the last few weeks, few months, is the American military suddenly becoming more open about, quote, UFO activity, which they're talking about now having happened and continues to happen in a very regular manner, day after day. And some of the radar pictures, etc., have been released. There's a History Channel documentary happening around the time that I'm speaking now about this revelation from the US Navy and so on, about the UFO activity, constant, really, UFO activity, interacting with the Earth. So, on one level, I should be saying, see, I told you. And, of course, in part, there are non-human races that have been described not just today by people who've had experience of them, but way back, centuries and thousands of years. One of the things that I've done in my research is talk to ancient societies, the carriers of the knowledge in ancient societies around the world, who are basically describing the same phenomenon that are described by abductees, etc., today. And so this is not a modern phenomenon where people are describing being abducted, being taken up on light beams into craft. Ancient texts and religious texts have described it in terms like people being taken up in fiery chariots by the gods. They're just describing the same phenomenon. It's not new. And so on that level, it's happening. But I would just add a note of caution here. Because what we call flying saucers are a technology known as anti-gravity. And the American military, other militaries around the world as well come to that, the major ones at least. But the American military, the deep inner core, compartmentalized inner core, operating in what they call DUMBs, deep underground military bases, which are legion across America, have known about anti-gravity technology for a very long time. It's clear that some of these craft that do have a non-human origin have crashed and have been reverse engineered so that, for instance, they've found out how they work. And so there are a lot of so-called UFOs that are being flown around and being seen and perceived as alien craft. They're actually being flown by humans from the American military and others. So we have to be very careful about, quote, disclosure and what the motivation of it is. Because, you know, you've had this wall of silence while people like me and so many others have been investigating non-human activity and interaction with the Earth. And now suddenly they're starting to put it out there. And the American military do not put things out there unless they want you to see them, after all this time of wanting us not to see them. And I would remind people of something that I wrote about a long time, other people have too, called Project Bluebeam. This was a military project to manipulate a fake, quote, alien invasion. So people thought they were being invaded by aliens. That would justify the centralization of political and military power in the world to meet the threat of the invasion. I mean, you had Ronald Reagan talking at one point when he was president, saying, you know, we'd all come together and meet the threat if we were faced with an alien invasion. And so Project Bluebeam was based on that, and many other aspects of Project Bluebeam as well. So we have to be very, very careful about disclosure and why it's being made. And I would introduce as a point of caution a manipulation technique that I named a long time ago. I call it problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem or an illusory problem, like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, the no problem reaction solution. You tell the public the story of the problem you want them to believe, so they will react with fear and anxiety and basically do something. And then those who've covertly created the problem or the illusion of a problem got the reaction, do something, then openly offer the solutions to the problems they have covertly created, and those solutions change the world and society in the way that they want. So problem reaction or no problem reaction solution and disclosure need to be kept in mind, because you create a illusion of an alien invasion because you have technology that people don't think humans have but do. And then you justify centralization of power militarily and politically in the world to meet the threat of the invasion, and you transform society. This Project Bluebeam is real, and we need to keep that in mind when we talk about disclosure, because they don't tell us, they don't give us information unless they want us to have it. Because what does information do? It It's from which we form our perceptions, which is the stadium in which this whole system of human control is played out.
David, it's been a pleasure having you right here at Third Phase Moon. Thanks for taking our questions. I want to make sure that you have one last statement that you want to give to our viewers, any last important message here.
Well, I could talk for hours about one last message and what we can do. But in the time we have, it's basically open your mind to all possibility. Ask yourself why you believe what you do. Why do you have the perceptions you have? Where did they come from? And if you chart them back, often they'll go external. The reason you believe what you believe is something that's come externally. It might have been a teacher, it might have been someone you met, it might have been a newspaper, TV news. So it's about questioning everything. Why do I believe this? And then, is what I believe valid? Are there other explanations? Are there other ways of looking at things? And instead of just waving away anything that's outside your perceptual limitation, self-imposed and externally downloaded, instead of just waving it away and say it can't be true because I can't perceive that it's true, check if it is true. Because I know so many people around the world who came to my information and at the start went, "Oh, load of rubbish, mate." And then for various reasons, as time passed, they looked at it a bit deeper and maybe have had some personal experience that made them think, well, maybe it's not so mad. And suddenly they realize, actually, not only is it not mad, it makes more sense of the world. But that process can only happen if you open your mind and let other possibility in. And when you do, you realize the pea-like bubble that we have been living in purely because we've accepted what the system has told us to believe. And the system wants you to believe that because it serves the system of control. Open your mind and you'll realize that the world is not like you thought it was.
Thanks, David, for joining us right here at Third Phase Moon. And I want to thank everybody from around the world who just watched this exclusive interview with David Icke. Make sure you check out the documentary coming out very soon, The Renegade. The link is below in the description. Everybody, keep your eyes on the skies. We're not alone. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks for your interest. All the best. Bye.